Raymond says to me, "Whom am I playing today?" And I said, "You're playing me, Mr. Floyd." He said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm nobody." I said, "I just do the handiwork around here."
When Lee Trevino calls someone the best ever, you listen. The Merrimax does not hand out praise lightly. He earned his 6 major championships the hard way. He taught himself to play on dirt-hard Texas fairways. He knows what it takes to win when everything is on the line. So when Trevino names his favorite golfers, he is not talking about style or talent. He is talking about toughness. He is talking about grit. And he is talking about players who earned their place through blood, sweat, and a refusal to quit. Trevino has named 5 golfers who sit at the top of his list. Each one represents something different. Each one proved themselves in ways that mattered to a man who learned golf by necessity, not by choice. These are the players who earned his respect. Let's find out why. Jack Nicklaus stands alone at the top of Trevino's list. There is no debate here. Trevino calls Jack the GOAT, the greatest of all time. But what makes this even more special is that Nicklaus said the exact same thing about Trevino. Of all the players Jack faced in his career, he called Trevino the hardest to beat. Think about that for a moment. The most dominant golfer in history said Trevino was his toughest opponent, and Trevino returned that respect by putting Jack at the very top of his own list. These two men could not have been more different. Trevino was the talker. He cracked jokes on the first tee. He told stories between shots. He used his words to stay loose and to get inside the heads of his opponents. Nicklaus was the opposite. He was quiet. He was focused. He did not waste energy on conversation. He saved everything for the golf course. Their battle at the 1971 U.S. Open playoff shows the contrast perfectly. Trevino was chatting away as they walked to the first tee. Nicklaus looked at him and said he did not feel like talking much that day. Trevino did not miss a beat. He smiled and said that was fine. Jack did not need to talk. He just needed to listen. And then Trevino went out and beat him. That moment meant everything to Trevino. Before that win, he felt like a stranger on the tour. He did not have the college background. He did not grow up playing junior golf. But when he beat Jack Nicklaus in a playoff for the U.S. Open, he proved he belonged. He proved that his way worked. Trevino also believes that Nicklaus would have been even more dominant with modern equipment. He says Jack was much stronger than Tiger Woods. He points out that Nicklaus could already hit the ball over 300 yards with the old equipment. Imagine what he could have done with today's drivers and balls. Trevino thinks Jack would have been hitting it so far that he would have been chipping back on some par 4s. That is how much respect Trevino has for Nicklaus. In his mind, Jack was not just the best of his era. He was the best ever, period. What separated Nicklaus from everyone else was his ability to perform under pressure. He won 18 major championships. He finished second 19 times. Those numbers tell a story. They tell you that when the stakes were highest, Jack found another gear. Trevino understood this better than anyone. He watched Jack make putts that should not have gone in. He watched him hit shots that changed tournaments. He saw firsthand what it meant to have ice in your veins. That is what Trevino means when he calls Jack the GOAT. It is not just about the wins. It is about how those wins happen. The mental strength that Nicklaus displayed never wavered. He could be 4 shots behind with 9 holes to play and still believe he would win. That confidence was not arrogance. It was earned through years of coming through in big moments. Trevino recognized this quality because he had it himself, but even Trevino admitted that Jack took it to another level. When a tournament was on the line, Nicklaus seemed to get calmer. Most players feel their heart racing. Most players feel their hands shaking. Jack seemed to slow down. He seemed to see the course more clearly. That is a rare gift. That is what champions are made of. Arnold Palmer earned Trevino's admiration for different reasons. Palmer was not just a champion, he was a symbol. He showed that a working-class kid could make it to the top. Palmer grew up in his father's pro shop at Latrobe Country Club. He learned to tinker with clubs in the workshop. He learned by doing, not by being taught. Trevino saw himself in that story. Trevino grew up caddying and picking cotton. He worked at golf courses from a young age. He learned the game the same way Palmer did, by grinding, by experimenting, by trying things and seeing what worked. Trevino said he and Palmer were alike in that way. Both of them loved to work on their clubs. Both of them spent hours in the workshop, grinding and adjusting and testing. Trevino joked that he and Arnold ruined more golf clubs than he could remember, but that process mattered. It taught them to trust their own instincts. It taught them that they did not need someone else to tell them how to play. They could figure it out themselves. Palmer also plays a role in one of Trevino's most famous stories. Trevino has a theory about putters. He calls it the blind putter theory. He says that when you first get a new putter, it is like a newborn kitten. It cannot see you yet. For about 7 days, you can make every putt, but then the putter opens its eyes. It sees you. It recognizes your flaws, and from that moment on, you putt just as badly with that putter as you did with your old one. This theory saved Trevino at the 1974 PGA Championship. He was struggling on the greens. He needed a blind putter. He was staying in a rented house, and he found one in the attic. It was an old Arnold Palmer blade putter. It still had the original grip. It was perfect for his forward press stroke. The owner of the house, Mrs. Mayberry, let him use it. Trevino shot an opening round of 73, then he shot 66. Over the weekend, he shot 68 and 69. He beat Jack Nicklaus by 1 stroke. He 3-putted only once in 72 holes. Trevino still has that putter. He named it Mrs. Mayberry. Winning a major with a putter that carried Arnold Palmer's name meant something to him. It was like he was invoking the spirit of a hero who had walked the same path. Palmer represented more than just success to Trevino. He represented validation. He proved that you did not need to come from privilege to reach the top of the game. You did not need fancy instruction or country club connections. You needed heart, you needed determination, and you needed the willingness to outwork everyone else. Palmer embodied all of that. When Trevino looked at Arnold Palmer, he saw proof that his own dream was possible. That is a powerful thing. That is why Palmer holds such a special place in Trevino's heart. If Jack Nicklaus was the standard of dominance, Seve Ballesteros was the king of creativity. Trevino gave Seve the highest praise he could give. He called him the best trouble shot player who ever lived. It did not matter how deep in the woods you put Seve, he would find a way out, and often he would do more than just escape. He would turn disaster into magic. Trevino understood why Seve was so good at this. Seve grew up playing on rough, uneven courses. He learned to improvise because he had no choice. Trevino learned the same way. When you play on dirt and hardpan, you cannot rely on perfect lies. You have to invent shots. You have to adapt. That is why Trevino had such deep respect for Seve. He saw a kindred spirit. He saw someone who earned his genius through hard work and necessity. Seve was also tireless. Trevino said Seve practiced from dawn to dusk. He never stopped working. That effort showed in his play. Seve did things on a golf course that no one else could do. He hit shots that should not have been possible. Trevino once said that Seve made him feel like he was living a few centuries ago when Spain ruled the world. Seve was a king. That is how Trevino saw him. Trevino did not just admire Seve from a distance, he learned from him. Seve showed Trevino 2 specific techniques that changed the way he played certain shots. The first was for soft bunker shots. Seve called it riding a pony. To do this, you set your feet at a 45-degree angle. You push your knees out toward your toes. You squat down and lower your hands. This keeps your body still. It lets you hit a soft, high shot where the ball barely rolls when it lands. Trevino adopted this method and used it for the rest of his career. The second technique was for the pitch and run. Seve would straighten his right leg to cover the ball. This let him de-loft the club and hit a low, penetrating shot. The club face stayed forward through impact. It was a mark of advanced control. Trevino studied this move and added it to his own game. But Trevino also had a practical side. He admired Seve's genius, but he knew that not everyone could play like Seve. He said that Seve inspired average players to take dumb chances. They would try hero shots because they saw Seve pull them off. But Seve had hands and imagination that most players did not have. Trevino separated the artistry from the strategy. He loved Seve's creativity, but he also knew that smart course management mattered more than flair for most golfers. What made Seve truly special was his fearlessness. He never saw a situation as hopeless. Other players would look at a ball buried in the rough behind a tree and think about how to get back to the fairway. Seve would look at the same shot and see a path to the green. He believed he could pull off any shot, and more often than not, he did. That belief came from hours of practice hitting from bad lies. It came from growing up on courses where perfect conditions did not exist. Seve learned to love the challenge of a difficult shot. That separated him from almost everyone else. Scottie Scheffler is the modern player on Trevino's list. Scheffler practices at Preston Trails, which is Trevino's home club in Dallas. Trevino sees him regularly. He calls Scheffler a lovely guy and a super individual. He says the golf world could not have a better number one. Coming from Trevino, that is a massive compliment. What makes Scheffler special to Trevino is his swing. It is unconventional. It should not work, but it does. Trevino jokes that Scheffler is cheating. He says Scheffler comes inside more than anyone else because his foot goes back during the swing. Using his own clock face method of analyzing swings, Trevino told Scheffler that he was hitting the ball at 8 o'clock. In other words, Scheffler's swing is breaking the rules. But the results do not lie. Scheffler is dominating the game. This is exactly the kind of thing Trevino respects. He has always believed that the score is the only thing that matters. You do not have to look pretty. You do not have to swing like a textbook. You just have to win. Scheffler proves that philosophy. His swing is weird, but he wins, and that is enough. However, Trevino has one concern about Scheffler. Despite all his success, Scheffler has started experimenting with his putter. He changed his grip. This scares Trevino. Trevino knows from experience how dangerous it is to tinker with your putter when things are going well. The mental side of putting is fragile. Once you start doubting your stroke, it is hard to get the confidence back. Trevino sees this as a warning sign. He worries that Scheffler might be opening the door to the same struggles that plagued Trevino throughout his career. For Trevino, the putter is where the mental battle is won or lost, and even the best players in the world are not safe from that battle. The 5th spot on Trevino's list goes to Chichi Rodriguez. Chichi never won a major championship, but that does not matter to Trevino. Chichi had something more important. He had hands, he had feel, he had the ability to hit any shot you could imagine. Trevino said that Chichi had as good a pair of hands as anybody he ever saw. He said Chichi had more shots than you could count. That is the ultimate compliment from a player like Trevino. Chichi and Trevino shared more than just skill. They shared a style. Both of them brought flair to the golf course. Both of them entertained the fans. Both of them them played with joy and creativity. Chi-Chi was a showman. He did not just hit great shots, he made them memorable. He turned golf into a performance. Trevino admired that, he understood it. He did the same thing in his own way. By including Chi-Chi in his top 5, Trevino is making a statement. He is saying that greatness is not just about major championships. It is about skill. It is about versatility. It is about having the ability to do things that others cannot do. Chi-Chi could hit every shot in the book. He could work the ball in any direction. He could escape from any trouble. That is what mattered to Trevino. That is what earned Chi-Chi a place on the list. When you look at these 5 players together, a pattern emerges. Nicklaus was the benchmark. He was the standard by which everyone else was measured. Palmer was the blue-collar hero. He showed that hard work and determination could take you to the top. Seve was the artist. He turned trouble into triumph. Scheffler is the modern marvel. He proves that effectiveness beats style every time. And Chi-Chi was the magician. He had the hands and the shots to do things that no one else could do. These 5 players represent everything Trevino values. They were self-made. They were original. They were fearless. They did not win because of natural talent. They won because they worked harder than everyone else. They won because they refused to quit. They won because they mastered the mental side of the game. And that is what matters most to Trevino. Trevino's own career proves the power of this philosophy. He did not have the pedigree. He did not have the coaching. He did not have the perfect swing. But he had the hunger. He had the grit. And he had the mental toughness to beat anyone when it mattered most. That is why his list of favorites is so meaningful. These are not just the players he admired. These are the players who proved that his way worked. They validated his belief that greatness comes from within. It comes from necessity. It comes from refusing to accept limits. Trevino often said that there is no such thing as natural touch. Touch is something you create by hitting millions of golf balls. That belief shaped everything about how he viewed the game. When he looked at these 5 players, he saw men who understood that same truth. They did not rely on talent alone. They built their games through repetition and dedication. They spent countless hours on the practice range. They experimented with different techniques. They failed over and over until they found what worked. That process created champions. That process separated the great from the good. This is also why Trevino has such strong opinions about modern golf. He believes the game has become too easy in some ways. The courses are too perfect. The equipment is too forgiving. Players do not need to develop the same shot-making skills that his generation required. When Trevino learned to play, the fairways were hard. The greens were inconsistent. You had to know how to hit a low runner. You had to know how to work the ball both ways. You had to be creative because every lie was different. That environment forced players to become complete. It forced them to develop versatility. Trevino worries that the modern game does not demand enough creativity. That is why players like Scheffler stand out to him. Scheffler succeeds despite having an unusual method. He finds ways to win even though his swing does not fit the mold. That reminds Trevino of his own era. The thread that connects all 5 of these players is authenticity. None of them pretended to be something they were not. Nicklaus was a focused competitor who did not waste time on distractions. Palmer was a charismatic charger who played with his heart on his sleeve. Sev was an artist who trusted his instincts over convention. Scheffler is a quiet grinder who lets his results speak for themselves. And Chi-Chi was an entertainer who brought joy to the game. Each one stayed true to who they were. Each one found success by being authentic. That is something Trevino deeply respects because he lived the same way. He never tried to be someone else. He embraced his personality. He used his humor and his self-taught swing to his advantage. And it worked. So when Trevino calls Jack Nicklaus the best ever, he is speaking from experience. When he praises Arnold Palmer's work ethic, he is honoring a shared journey. When he celebrates Sieve's creativity, he is recognizing a fellow artist. When he endorses Scotty Scheffler, he is passing the torch to a new generation. And when he includes Chi-Chi Rodriguez, he is saying that skill and heart matter more than trophies. These 5 golfers are Trevino's pantheon. They are the players who earned his respect. And in the world of Lee Trevino, there is no higher honor than that. Who do you think should make the list? Let us know in the comments.
He asked me if he could caddy. I said, yeah, I don't have one. I need him. That'd be great. And he knew the course, and he didn't quite know the club selection until after I hit the second hole. I hit an 8-iron from 205. He goes, okay, I get it. You're 4 clubs stronger than Nick. Sorry, Nick, but I hit an 8-iron 205, and he figured it out from there. And it was just, we just hit it like that. It was awesome.
He's the best ever. Those words rarely left John Daly's mouth about anyone. The Wild Thing, golf's most unpredictable star and perhaps its last true outlaw, spent his career defying tradition with a diet of chocolate, Diet Coke, and cigarettes. He was cited for behavior unbecoming a professional. But despite his reputation for tearing down the establishment, 6 golfers earned something from Daly that almost nobody got: his respect. And the names might surprise you. Think about what it takes to impress John Daly. This man won 2 majors on raw talent alone. The the longest hitter on tour in the 1990s when 300-yard drives were novelties. He openly admitted he wasted his talent in the 90s. He didn't work hard enough or prepare properly to win tournaments. Daly wished he had the mental attitude back in the 90s like he does now. So when Daly respects someone, he's acknowledging something deeper: mental fortitude, competitive execution under pressure, full utilization of talent. Let's start with Jack Nicklaus, the ultimate embodiment of golf tradition. You might think Daly and Nicklaus would be opposites. The Golden Bear represented establishment values while Daly challenged conservative culture. But Daly's respect for Nicklaus runs deep. It started before their paths crossed. Daly learned the fundamental grip from the Jack Nicklaus Lesson Tee, a cartoon series released around 1969 or 1970. The most traditional golfer in history accidentally became the architect of the Outlaws game. That early influence created lifelong recognition of Nicklaus as the technical and historical authority. And the respect went both ways. When Nicklaus first saw Daly's unprecedented swing, he was blown away. "Good gracious, what a coil, what an unleashing of power," Nicklaus said. "I don't know who he reminds me of. I haven't seen anybody who hit the ball that far." Coming from the greatest player in golf history, that validation meant everything to the young outlaw. Then came 1995. Daly won the Open Championship at St. Andrews, and his name was inscribed on the claret jug alongside Bobby Jones, Sam Snead, and Jack Nicklaus. For Daly, that moment solidified Nicklaus as the benchmark for enduring greatness. Winning 2 majors was the definitive achievement. By placing himself alongside the Golden Bear on that trophy, Daly validated his career through Nicklaus's towering legacy. Now let's talk about Tiger Woods. Daly's perspective on Tiger isn't simple awe. It's a reflection of what could have been. There's a famous story that perfectly captures their relationship. Daly invited Woods for a beer. Tiger was dressed in workout attire and declined because he needed to lift weights. Daly told him, "Man, you don't need to work out. You need to drink a little bit with us." Tiger's response cut through: "If I had your talent, I'd be doing the same thing you're doing." Daly thought Tiger was crazy, but the truth hit hard. Woods was fully committed to maximizing his already incredible talent through intense work ethic and unwavering discipline. Daly relied solely on raw talent to compensate for lack of preparation. That moment crystallized everything about their different paths. Woods chose the gym over the beer. He chose discipline over comfort, and that choice translated into the most dominant career modern golf had seen. When Daly talks about sustained excellence, he immediately references Woods as the historical precedent. Tiger had that kind of run for a long time, Daly says. Woods became the yardstick for dominance. Daly respects Woods because Woods bridged the gap between raw ability and realized potential. He proved talent alone is insufficient. Woods did everything Daly wished he had done. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this deep dive into golf history, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment telling us which golfer on this list surprised you most. Next is Greg Norman, the Great White Shark. Norman earns Daly's respect not just as a dominant player, but as a powerful figure reshaping professional golf. Here's where it gets interesting. Daly openly revealed that he begged Greg Norman for a spot on LIV Golf. Begged! This shows how much authority Norman commands. Daly was frustrated with the Champions Tour, saying he wasn't getting a lot out of it. Meanwhile, LIV was a big party where players competed for serious money. Norman seemed to squash the idea, telling Daly he was too old. But Daly kept pushing, offering to handle entertainment. That persistence reveals profound respect. Norman created a financially disruptive alternative to traditional golf. He leveraged his legendary status to become CEO and commissioner of a rival tour. Norman monetized golf outside the traditional framework, transforming a legacy into a billion-dollar venture. But the respect goes deeper than business. When Daly discusses periods of elite performance, he positions Norman alongside Woods as the definitive modern benchmark. If you look back, Norman had a run like that too, Daly noted. Norman was renowned for his bold, aggressive style, one of the best long drivers of his era, intimidating opponents with his length and straightness. This shared archetype of the powerful golfer forms a natural bridge between them. Now we arrive at one of the most dramatic moments in Open history, Costantino Rocca. Daly's admiration stems entirely from one high-stakes moment at the 1995 Open. On the 72nd hole, Rocca needed a birdie to force a playoff. His pitch found the Valley of Sin, leaving him about 65 feet from the hole. Daly had signed for a 71, believing the tournament was his. Then Rocca drained the 65-footer. The roar was massive. The playoff was on. I thought it was mine. I actually thought it was mine. That's got to be one of the ultimate putts ever made in golf. I couldn't believe it went in. Next thing you know, we're in a playoff. That acknowledgement of ultimate execution validates Rocca's brilliance in that solitary moment. But while Daly was mentally composed and ready for the playoff, Rocca wasn't. He didn't stop shaking until the second playoff hole, Daly observed. Daly won the 4 holes by 5 shots and claimed the claret jug. This reveals something crucial about Daly's mental game. Daly, who often admitted his career was plagued by poor mental attitude, demonstrated superior nerve when it mattered most. The enduring memory is the drama and audacity of Rocca's effort, which forced him to earn the trophy through sustained, competitive nerve rather than a simple victory. Next is Laura Davies. Daly's respect for Davies is acknowledgement of her professional power and competitive parity. His admiration transcends gender considerations and focuses purely on merit. Daly and Davies won the final edition of the JCPenney Classic in 1999, a mixed team tournament. They rallied from 5 shots behind with a strong Sunday performance and defeated Paul Azinger and Seiri Pak on the 3rd extra hole of a playoff. But the real evidence of respect centers on power. Davies was one of the hardest hitters in women's golf. In a 1996 Australian Skins tournament featuring Daly Davies, 5-time Open champion Tom Watson, and Peter Sr., Davies proved her power parity. While Sr. was in awe of Daly's 300-plus yard drives, Davies held her own against the male trio and regularly outdrove Watson and Sr. Watson himself noted that Davies made a couple of crucial putts to stop John early on. Daly's reputation rests almost entirely on his aggressive style and long driving. His high regard for Davies derives from her matching him in this crucial area. She was a technical and power equal, capable of competing effectively from championship tees against established male professionals. The fact that Daly respects Davies purely on merit demonstrates his criteria for admiration are based strictly on performance and shared prowess. Finally, we arrive at the present day, Scottie Scheffler. Daly grants contemporary respect to Scheffler, analyzing his dominance through a technical lens. Daly acknowledges Scheffler's current run of excellence, comparing it to the sustained dominance of Woods and Norman. But his admiration for Scheffler focuses on technical execution and relentless consistency rather than raw power. Daly observes that in modern golf, long driving is no longer a differentiating factor. All the guys hit it kind of the same off the tee, he notes. So what makes Scheffler exceptional? His iron play is great, and his putting is just phenomenal. Scheffler represents everything the 1990s John Daly was not. While Daly admitted to wasting his talent through lack of preparation and mental lapses, Scheffler is defined by unflappable discipline and clinical execution. This reveals a critical truth. Daly accepts that golf has changed since his era. By respecting Scheffler, he's acknowledging the formula for winning has evolved. The new standard is defined by technical refinement and consistent scoring ability. Scheffler's dominance is built on precision and mental resolve rather than brute force. He earns respect by defining the successful contemporary model. So what does this list of 6 golfers tell us about John Daly? It reveals something most people miss about the Wild Thing. Despite his outlaw reputation, despite the cigarettes and Diet Coke and chaos, Daly fundamentally understands what it takes to achieve greatness in professional golf. The players he respects either taught him the game, matched his power, forced him to demonstrate competitive nerve, or perfected the mental execution he struggled to sustain. The irony is beautiful. The man who seemed to reject everything golf stood for actually holds its greatest champions in the highest esteem, not because of their conformity, but because of their excellence. Nicklaus gave him the foundation. Woods showed him what maximized potential looks like. Norman proved you could be powerful and entrepreneurial. Rocca delivered one of the ultimate clutch moments. Davies matched his power on pure merit, and Scheffler defines what modern dominance requires. John Daly's respect operates as a meritocracy that judges results, execution, and mental strength above all else. These 6 golfers represent the road he could have taken, the potential he admits he wasted, and the greatness he never stopped appreciating. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more untold stories from golf history. Thanks for watching.
Well, I think that I got 3 good ideas that might help all of you, or will help all of you for that matter. It's been proven that almost every shot you hit comes up short.
He's the best ever. Those 3 words from Johnny Miller carried more weight than from anyone else in golf. Why? Because when the Desert Fox spoke, he judged players by a standard most announcers wouldn't dare touch. Miller wasn't interested in playing nice. He once said most announcers play patty cake with the players they cover. But his brutal honesty came from somewhere deeper. It came from respect. And the 5 golfers Miller admired most reveal exactly why his commentary hit so hard. Before we understand Miller's favorites, we need to know what gave him the right to judge June 17, 1973, Oakmont Country Club, final round of the US Open. Miller shot an 8 under par 63. That score stood as a major championship record for over 40 years. This wasn't just a good round. This was perfection under pressure on one of the hardest courses in the world. Miller called it his Oakmont standard. Every time he criticized a player, that round gave him the authority to do it. He would point out that his 63 at Oakmont meant more than someone else's 63 at an easier course. That performance became his license to speak the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made people. The round itself was a masterclass in precision golf. golf. Miller hit 17 greens in regulation. His iron play was so pure that day that he made the impossible look routine. The greens at Oakmont are notoriously fast and severely sloped. One poor approach shot means a three-putt or worse, but Miller navigated them like he owned the place. His ball striking was so crisp that he gave himself birdie chances on nearly every hole. What made the 63 even more remarkable was the pressure he faced. Miller started the final round 6 shots behind the leaders. Nobody expected him to win, but he played the round of his life when it mattered most. That's the kind of performance that earns you the right to criticize others. Miller's career lasted 28 years as a player, then 29 years as NBC's lead golf analyst. When he retired in 2019, golf lost its most honest voice. He had a simple rule: take off their clothes but leave their underwear on. That meant exposing flaws without destroying dignity. Miller admitted his goal was brutal, unvarnished honesty. If you didn't like his announcing, you didn't like him. That confidence came from knowing he had walked the walk. But Miller's playing career wasn't perfect. After his early brilliance, his game fell apart. He tinkered with his swing constantly. He developed the putting yips, that terrible condition where your hands freeze over short putts. This collapse taught him something important. He learned to worship the players who had what he didn't: mental toughness, consistency, the ability to stay calm when everything is falling apart. His own struggles made him judge others more harshly when they showed weakness, but they also made him appreciate greatness when he saw it. The yips haunted Miller for years, turning simple 3-foot putts into agonizing moments of doubt. He would stand over the ball knowing his hands might betray him at any moment. This wasn't just about missing putts. It was about losing trust in his own body. Watching other players roll in putts with confidence became torture for Miller. He knew he had the talent to compete with anyone from tee to green, but on the greens, he was vulnerable. This weakness shaped everything about how he viewed golf. Players who could put under pressure earned his deepest respect, while those who missed short putts in big moments faced his harshest criticism. Miller understood that golf is ultimately won or lost on the greens, and his personal demons made him hypersensitive to putting performance in others. In 1994, Miller stepped out of the broadcast booth and won the AT&T Pebble Beach National Pro-Am. He beat Tom Watson in a playoff. Watson shook his hand and said, "Great playing. Now get your butt back in the booth where you belong." That moment proved Miller wasn't just talking. He could still compete at the highest level. So, who were the 5 golfers Miller admired most? The ones who set his impossible standards? Let's start with the man who represented pure ball striking. Ben Hogan was Miller's ultimate technical ideal. When Miller looked at a golf swing, he saw it through Hogan's eyes. Classic geometry, perfect positions, no wasted motion. Hogan played in the 1950s, but Miller never stopped using him as the measuring stick. If a swing didn't match Hogan's principles, Miller had a problem with it. The most famous example came in 2004. Craig Perry, an Australian player with an unusual swing, hit a shot at the Ford Championship at Doral. Miller watched it and said something that shocked everyone. Ben Hogan saw that, he'd puke. Radio stations in Australia demanded Miller be fired. The controversy went international, but Miller didn't back down. To him, Hogan's standard was not up for debate. Miller explained exactly what made Hogan great. Good iron players finish lower at impact than at address. They increase the flex in their knees. Moving down on a diagonal line, they lean the club shaft forward toward the target. That creates a pure strike. Hogan also had a specific way to control trajectory. He would curl his left wrist after impact to avoid a hook and hit a cut shot. These technical details mattered to Miller. They were the building blocks of perfect golf. Miller loved to share his own standards from his prime. His 9-iron went 125 yards. His 6-iron went 160 yards. His 4-iron went 185 yards. He believed trying to squeeze extra distance from irons was the kiss of death. He never swung more than 75%. Rhythm and balance mattered more than power. What Miller loved about Hogan was the deliberate nature of his practice. Hogan would hit balls for hours with a specific purpose for every shot. He wasn't just warming up or staying loose. He was programming his swing through repetition until the correct movements became automatic. Hogan believed that the secret to golf was in the dirt, meaning you had to dig it out through practice. No shortcuts, no gimmicks, just thousands of perfectly executed swings building muscle memory. Miller shared this philosophy. He believed modern players practiced too casually. They would hit balls while chatting with friends or checking their phones. Hogan would have been disgusted by that approach. When Hogan practiced, he was alone with his thoughts, working through swing problems with intense focus. Miller tried to bring that same intensity to his practice sessions, though he admitted he could never match Hogan's legendary discipline. This difference between Hogan's unwavering commitment and Miller's more volatile approach created a gap that Miller felt throughout his career. He knew what perfect practice looked like. He just couldn't sustain it the way Hogan did. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe. If you're enjoying this breakdown of Miller's standards, and drop a comment. Which of these 5 golfers do you think influenced Miller's commentary the most? Let's keep going. By constantly referencing Hogan's 1950s ideal, Miller became golf's technical conservative. He criticized the modern game, oversized clubs, soft golf balls that forgive bad contact. He felt these advances let players get away with poor technique. Miller positioned himself as a gatekeeper of classical values, using Hogan's perfection to highlight every flaw in modern swings. He wanted to see players forced to execute with precision, not rely on technology to cover their mistakes. Miller often talked about how modern equipment had changed the game fundamentally. In Hogan's era, a miss-hit shot would cost you severely, the ball would slice or hook wildly, distance would drop dramatically, but with modern clubs and balls, a shot struck poorly might only lose 10 or 15 yards and still find the fairway. Miller saw this as weakening the game. It allowed players with flawed techniques to succeed at the highest level. Players who would have struggled in Hogan's era were now winning tournaments. Miller didn't think this was progress. He thought it was dilution. The game was getting easier in ways that masked technical deficiencies. When Miller praised a player's swing, it was because that swing would have worked in any era with any equipment. Those were the swings built on timeless principles, the kind Hogan would have approved of. Next came the player who represented everything Miller wished he could have been. Mentally, Jack Nicklaus was the ultimate picture of mental toughness and competitive certainty. Miller's own game collapsed because of mental struggles, the yips, the constant swing changes, the streaky play. So when he watched Nicklaus, he saw the opposite: unwavering consistency, total preparation, complete control. Miller summed up Nicklaus with one perfect observation. Nobody ever heard Jack Nicklaus say, "I don't know about anything, think about that." Nicklaus always had an answer, always had a plan, never showed doubt. That confidence separated him from everyone else. Miller, who battled doubt his entire career, respected that more than anything. Both men won U.S. Opens at Oakmont, so they shared that bond. Nicklaus won in 1962. He reflected on it later and said he was still upset that he had one 3-putt during the entire week, just one, and he was mad about it. Miller remembered his own 63 round and recalled having one 3-putt as well. That obsessive focus on putting accuracy is what elite champions demand of themselves. When people compared the two, they admitted Nicklaus was a slam dunk better putter. Miller was more accurate with middle irons, but Nicklaus had greater overall consistency. That consistency haunted Miller. He knew he had the talent to match Nicklaus's ball striking, but he couldn't match his mental strength. That's why Nicklaus earned Miller's highest respect. The Golden Bear never wavered, never showed weakness. In Miller's mind, that psychological armor was just as important as technical skill, because the golf course and the pressure of competition exposed mental weakness ruthlessly. Miller knew this from experience. He had lost tournaments because his mind failed him, not his swing. Nicklaus represented a level of mental control that Miller could only dream about. When Nicklaus stood over a crucial putt, he never seemed nervous. His routine was always the same, his tempo never changed. Miller would watch Nicklaus in big moments and marvel at how calm he appeared. Meanwhile, Miller's own hands would shake when pressure mounted. His breathing would become shallow. His mind would race with doubt. Nicklaus had somehow mastered the mental game in a way that seemed almost superhuman to Miller. This is why Miller's commentary was often harder on players who showed mental weakness. He was projecting his own frustrations onto them. When he called someone a choker, he was really talking about himself, about all the times he had failed under pressure. Nicklaus proved that mental mastery was possible, which made Miller's own mental failures even harder to accept. Now we move to the player Miller believed reached the absolute peak of golf. Tiger Woods between 2000 and 2001 played the highest level of golf Miller had ever seen. This wasn't just about winning, it was about how Woods won. The technical execution combined with unprecedented athleticism created something new, something even better than Hogan. Miller gave very specific praise to Woods' swing. He pointed out the hallmark of a great swing. At the halfway point of the backswing, the club shaft should look like it's growing out of your left forearm. That line should stay perfect through impact and beyond. Miller said Woods' extraordinary physical strength and superior body movement allowed him to hold that position even after the ball was gone. Most players can't do that. Woods could. The best example was Woods' famous stinger shot, a low, controlled punch that flies like a bullet. The stinger requires tremendous technical mastery and strength. Woods executed it better than anyone. The key was stopping the hands fast right after impact while keeping the club precisely on line with the left forearm. Most players can't maintain that control. Woods made it look easy. Miller's assessment was clear. Woods achieved purity plus power. Hogan had the purity. Woods had both. That made him the theoretical peak of golf performance. But even Woods wasn't safe from Miller's criticism. Miller would still point out flaws when he saw them. That was the difference between Miller and other commentators. Everyone else offered flattery. Miller offered truth. That independence defined his style. What separated Woods from everyone else in Miller's eyes was the combination of old-school fundamentals with new-school athleticism. Woods didn't abandon the principles that made Hogan great. He built upon them. His impact position was just as pure as Hogan's, but he generated far more clubhead speed through superior fitness toughness and flexibility, Miller saw this as the natural evolution of the game, not a departure from it. Woods proved you could honor classical technique while pushing physical boundaries. This made him the perfect golfer in Miller's mind, someone who respected the past while dominating the present. Miller's fourth favorite brought something completely different to the table. Seve Ballesteros represented competitive passion, raw emotion, unfiltered fire, while Miller focused heavily on cold geometry and mental control. Seve reminded him that golf also needs soul. The Spanish legend didn't always have perfect technique. His swing could be erratic, but his brilliance came from improvisation and sheer competitive desire. Miller's observation about Seve was particularly touching because he made it after the Spaniard died. Seve wore his emotions on his sleeve. You could see how much the guy cared about winning. That visible commitment mattered to Miller. Seve proved that intense competitive fire could make up for technical imperfections. He could overcome anything through pure passion. The ultimate standard requires more than technical skill and mental discipline. It also requires an intense, unfiltered competitive spirit. Seve had it, and Miller respected him deeply for it. The fifth and final player on Miller's list brought everything together in a personal way. Tom Watson represented peer respect. Miller and Watson were rivals who became friends. They competed against each other at the highest level. That shared battle created mutual understanding. The defining moment came at the 1994 AT&T Pebble Beach National Pro-Am. Miller had already moved into broadcasting, but he entered the tournament and somehow found his old magic. The final round came down to Miller versus Watson in a playoff. Miller won. Watson's reaction said everything. He shook Miller's hand and told him, "Great playing. Now get your butt back in the booth where you belong." That comment worked on two levels. It was a gracious acknowledgement that Miller could still play, but it was also an instruction. Watson was telling Miller his real value now was as a critic. Watson's respect validated everything Miller said from the booth. These five legends formed the foundation of Miller's entire analytical system. They weren't random favorites. They were the building blocks of his philosophy. The technical axis was built on Hogan and Woods. Hogan set the geometric standard for pure ball striking. Woods proved you could have that purity while adding modern athletic power. Every swing Miller analyzed got measured against what Hogan or peak Woods could do. The psychological axis came from Nicklaus and Ballesteros. Nicklaus showed the strategic, clinical approach needed for long-term success. Ballesteros showed the raw competitive passion that could overcome chaos. The peer axis centered on Watson. His respect proved. Miller's judgments came from shared competitive experience, not just observation. When Miller criticized a player, it wasn't an outsider talking. It was someone who had just beaten Tom Watson in a playoff talking. Together, these five players created what Miller saw as a golf museum of necessary attributes: technical purity from Hogan, mental control from Nicklaus, raw dominance from Woods, competitive soul from Ballesteros, peer legitimacy from Watson. Every great player needed some combination of these qualities, and when Miller found them lacking, he said so. Miller's legacy in broadcasting reshaped how golf commentary worked. His willingness to tell unpopular truths generated controversy. After the Hogan puke comment, people wanted him fired, but NBC producers saw Miller's candor as an asset. It made compelling television. Miller also functioned as an educator. He didn't just criticize, he explained why something was wrong and how to fix it. That teaching element gave his commentary lasting value, and sometimes his harsh words actually helped players improve. Ricky Fowler openly thanked Miller for his commentary. Fowler said Miller's tough appraisals inspired him to work harder. That fulfilled Miller's purpose. He wanted to maintain high standards and push players to be better. Miller's authority came from one crucial factor. He was willing to judge himself by the same harsh standards. He admitted when he choked or played awful that self-awareness meant his criticism came from a place of shared vulnerability, not distance. He understood failure because he had experienced it, but he also understood greatness because he had achieved it. That unique combination made him the most influential golf analyst of his era. The five players Miller admired most weren't just his favorites, they were his measuring sticks. When Miller watched modern players, he was always asking the same questions. Do they have Hogan's technical purity? Nicklaus's mental strength? Woods' combination of precision and power? Sev's competitive fire? Watson's peer respect? If the answer was no, Miller told us, and that honesty, built on the foundation of these five legends, is why we still remember Johnny Miller's voice. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Miller's standards, hit that like button and check out more golf content on the channel. Thanks for watching.
One thing I don't like about the modern swing, basically you stick your butt out.
Miller says Nicklaus played chicken golf. That would be wonderful.
I don't think Walt's in there like John Wayne, but he probably could do it.
Johnny Miller was golf's most brutal critic, the Desert Fox, the man who brought the word choke back into golf commentary, the analyst who could dissect a swing from the broadcast booth and leave a player's confidence in ruins. He didn't sugarcoat anything, play the corporate game. He made a lot of people uncomfortable with his weaponized honesty. But here's what most people miss. Johnny Miller actually respected a golfer meant something. Standards were impossible. His criteria for greatness were so exacting that even major champions fell short. And only 6 players in the history of the game truly earned his admiration. 6 golfers who met a test that 99% of the tour couldn't pass. 6 names that defined what Miller believed excellence actually looked like. Miller wasn't cruel. He was obsessed with perfection. That final round 63 at Oakmont in 1973, pure contact, sound of compression. He knew what greatness looked like because he'd lived it. He spent the rest of his career searching for it in others. He understood the difference between good golf and transcendent golf, between winning tournaments and achieving something that bordered on the supernatural. His respect wasn't about politeness or professional courtesy. It's about recognizing when someone operated on a plane that most players could never reach. Let's start with Ben Hogan. If Johnny Miller had a golfing god, it was Hogan. This was foundational. It started in a basement in San Francisco, where Miller's father built a practice facility. Larry Miller wanted to manufacture a champion. The blueprint was Ben Hogan. Miller's father studied Hogan's positions: the wrist pronation, lower body stability, rotation through impact. From childhood, Miller viewed the golf swing through Hogan's lens. Swing was only correct if it matched the geometric truths Hogan had established. This wasn't just admiration from afar. This was religious devotion. Miller's entire understanding of ball striking was filtered through what Hogan had proven possible. When Miller stood over a shot, when he analyzed his own mechanics, when he thought about what separated great from good, it all came back to Hogan. The hawk was the measuring stick, the ultimate authority, the final word on what a golf swing should be. As a broadcaster, Miller obsessed over Hogan's real secret: the impact position. Miller believed great iron players lower themselves into the ground. They increase knee flex. This compression allows the hands to lead the club head, de-lofting the iron and trapping the ball. That's what produced Hogan's penetrating ball flight. Miller used this to judge everyone. When modern players stood up through impact, saw a fatal flaw. When he praised Hogan, he was praising biomechanical perfection. The depth of Miller's respect survived personal rejection. As a young amateur, Miller approached Hogan at a US Open and introduced himself as the low amateur. Hogan's response was cold and terse. It would have crushed most people. But Miller separated the personality from the practitioner. Hogan's icy demeanor was part of his legendary focus, and Miller respected the isolation mastery required. During his NBC career, Miller weaponized Hogan's legacy. At the 2004 Ford Championship, watching Craig Perry's looping swing, Miller said on live television that it would make Ben Hogan puke. The comment drew criticism, but it revealed Miller's binary thinking. There was the Hogan way and everything else. Golf wasn't just about scores. It was about the integrity of the action. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this deep dive into what made Johnny Miller's standards so impossible to meet, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Who do you think had the purest swing Miller ever saw? Let me know below. Now, Byron Nelson. If Hogan was the god of mechanics, Nelson was the patron saint of consistency. Miller's respect had 2 layers. He revered Nelson's 1945 performance and felt a personal connection to Nelson's faith. No number impressed Miller more than 11. The consecutive tournaments Byron Nelson won in 1945. Miller called this unbreakable. Even during Tiger's dominance in 2000, Miller pointed to Nelson. Woods never won 11 straight. To Miller, Nelson represented incomprehensible dominance. Technically, Miller saw Nelson as the precursor to his own iron mastery. Miller studied Nelson's dip, how Nelson dropped his head through the hitting zone. Nelson sagged his knees down and toward the target. Miller argued this was essential for controlling old equipment, but also timeless. Modern players who stood up lost compression ability. Nelson's swing was efficient, repeatable, fundamentally sound. But Miller's connection to Nelson went deeper. Miller was a devout Mormon. His faith shaped his life. He saw a kindred spirit in Nelson, a man of deep faith who retired early to his ranch. Miller respected that Nelson didn't let golf consume him. Unlike Hogan, Nelson mastered the game and walked away. Nelson was gracious, humble, lethal inside the ropes. Miller often deferred to Nelson in debates about the greatest ball striker. He described watching Nelson in his 60s hit the ball dead straight every time. Just 1-yard pulls and 1-yard pushes. To a precision artist like Miller, that lack of curvature was the ultimate sign of control. Nelson wasn't a relic. He was a practitioner of a lost art, hitting the ball exactly where you aim it every single time. And here's what separated Nelson from everyone else in Miller's mind. Nelson achieved his dominance during an era when equipment was unforgiving. No titanium drivers, no cavity back irons, no launch monitors to dial in your numbers. Just feel, repetition, and an iron will to be perfect. Nelson mastered golf when golf was at its hardest. That's why his 11 straight wins weren't just impressive, they were almost mythical. Then Sam Snead. Snead represented natural genius and longevity. While Miller's swing was intense work, he viewed Snead as pure inspiration. Miller's career peak was short. The Yips ended his dominance by the late 70s, so he was fascinated by Snead competing into his 60s. Miller played with Snead in the 70s, when Snead was a grandfather, and watched him outdrive players half his age. Miller admired Snead's physique elasticity, how Snead recruited power from the ground. Snead's body was perfectly tuned for swinging. Miller worked hard to maintain mechanics. Snead just flowed. One of Miller's favorite broadcasting mantras came from Snead: "Forget your opponents. Always play against par." Miller used this quote constantly to criticize players who got caught up in match play dynamics during stroke play events. He respected Snead's mental discipline to simplify the game. Snead wasn't just a country boy hitting bombs. He was a tactical genius who understood the course was the only true adversary. Miller also connected with Snead geographically. Both conquered Oakmont. Snead won the PGA Championship there in 1951. Miller won the US Open there in 1973. Miller respected anyone who could tame Oakmont. He described the greens as surfaces where a dime would slide away. Snead's success at Oakmont proved he had a complete game. Power for the fairways, touch for the greens. Miller defined respect through the sound of impact. He spoke about the mash, the noise of a compressed ball. Placed Snead in the elite fraternity of players who trapped the ball. There were players who hit it, and then there were Hogan, Nelson, and Snead. Made a different sound entirely. Miller's respect for Snead was an acknowledgement that some things can't be taught, only admired. Snead represented the ceiling of natural ability, the absolute peak of what the human body could do with a golf club when everything aligned perfectly. Miller worked obsessively to manufacture greatness. Snead was born with it flowing through his veins. Now we get to the ultimate yardstick, Jack Nicklaus. While Hogan, Nelson, and Snead were Miller's idols growing up, Nicklaus was the dragon he had to slay. Miller's respect for Nicklaus was forged in direct competition. The mid-70s, Miller briefly challenged Nicklaus for best in the world. History remembers Nicklaus versus Watson, Nicklaus versus Palmer, but for a concentrated period, Nicklaus versus Miller is the defining narrative. In 1974 and 1975, Miller ranked second in the world behind Nicklaus. They traded victories, head-to-head in majors. Miller famously said he wasn't claiming to be better than Jack Nicklaus, but right now, he was playing better. That statement captured everything. Miller had the audacity to challenge the Golden Bear at his peak, and for a brief window, he had the game to back it up. Miller respected Nicklaus because he knew how hard it was to beat him. He viewed Nicklaus as the ultimate closer. In broadcast after broadcast, Miller compared modern leads to Nicklaus leads. He reminded viewers that Jack would never bogey the last 3 holes from that position. Nicklaus became Miller's unit of measurement for his entire analytical career. One of Miller's most profound insights was the B game theory. Miller admitted that when he didn't have his A game, when his iron play wasn't razor sharp, struggled to win. He was a thoroughbred who needed perfect conditions. Nicklaus could win with his B game, his C game, even his D game. Miller marveled at Nicklaus managing his way around a course, turning a potential 75 into a 70 through sheer will, putting, and conservative strategy. When Nicklaus played well, he won. When he played badly, he finished second. When he played terribly, he finished third. This quote captured Miller's reverence. He respected the ball striking, but he respected the consistency of results even more. He viewed Nicklaus's mind as the greatest weapon in golf history. In the endless Tiger versus Jack debate, Miller frequently sided with Nicklaus. His reasoning was contextual. Miller argued Nicklaus faced a deeper, tougher field than Woods did. Nicklaus had to duel Palmer, Player, Trevino, Watson, and yes, Johnny Miller. Miller inserted himself not out of vanity, but genuine belief. He thought the golden era was golf's crucible. The quality of the adversary defined the quality of the champion, and Jack's adversaries were the strongest ever. He was the GOAT. Miller occasionally joked that Nicklaus played chicken golf, aiming away from pins, playing for the center of greens, but this was a backhanded compliment. Miller, aggressive to a fault, respected Nicklaus's discipline. Chicken golf was actually winning golf. Never beat himself. You had to take the trophy from him, like Miller did at Oakmont in 1973. Now let's talk about Lee Trevino, the peer Miller feared. In the ecosystem of Miller's respect, Trevino occupied a special slot, a contemporary who could match and maybe exceed his own ball striking. When asked to list the best ball strikers of all time, Miller placed himself on the list. He almost always placed Trevino at the very top, alongside Hogan. Miller described Trevino's impact as having a lot of mash, hitting the middle of the sweet spot every time, hitting it dead where he was looking. Miller respected the dirt-style nature of Trevino's game. Like Hogan, Trevino dug his game out of the ground in Texas. Miller, the California golden boy with the polished swing, was in awe of Trevino's homemade repeating action. He saw Trevino as a shot maker who could manipulate trajectory better than anyone. Miller wasn't easily intimidated, but Trevino had his number. Miller recounted Trevino razzing him on the practice tee during his rookie years. Miller gave it back. Trevino never bothered him again after that. This interaction was a rite of passage. Miller respected Trevino for testing him, and he believed. Trevino respected him for firing back. They formed a mutual admiration society based on the shared ability to pure a 2-iron. The 1976 Open Championship at Royal Birkdale was defining for both. Miller won some of the best golf of his life to hold off young Seve Ballesteros and Jack Nicklaus. But of all the players in the field, Trevino was the one Miller watched most closely. Trevino's control in the wind was the standard Miller aspired to. Miller later said one of the greatest pieces of advice he ever received came from Trevino. Mentorship existed beneath the rivalry. Miller loved the fade. He hit a fade. Hogan hit a fade. Trevino hit a fade. Miller dissected Trevino's open stance and strong grip on air, learning how Trevino cleared his hips to prevent the hook. Miller respected that Trevino understood his own swing perfectly. Unlike modern players relying on technology, Trevino knew his flight by feel. Miller, a feel player himself, revered this intuition. Trevino proved you didn't need a textbook swing to achieve perfection. You needed complete mastery of your own action. You needed to know every variable, every compensation, every nuance of how your body and the club worked together. That self-knowledge was rarer than any technical perfection. Finally, Tiger Woods. The most complex relationship, the six. To the public, Miller appeared to be Tiger's harshest critic. He criticized swing changes, muscle gain, and drops. But a deeper look reveals Miller held Woods in a category of respect that exceeded even his peers. Miller criticized Woods because he believed Woods was capable of perfection, and for a brief time in 2000, he saw it. Miller was unequivocal about Tiger's 2000 US Open at Pebble Beach. He called it the greatest golf ever played. Before the tournament began, Miller sensed something different. He could feel Tiger's aura. He predicted Tiger would win by a record score and run away with it. Miller respected dominance. Watching Woods win by 15 strokes at Pebble Beach, hitting spots on greens no one else could reach, was a religious experience. Miller admitted Woods in 2000 was the only player who could arguably beat the best of the 70s. Why the criticism? Miller believed Woods under Butch Harmon had achieved the holy grail of swings. When Woods began changing his swing under Hank Haney, later Sean Foley, Miller was visibly frustrated. It wasn't disrespect. It was the frustration of a perfectionist watching a genius tamper with a masterpiece. Miller respected Woods' talent so much he couldn't stand seeing it diluted by unnecessary technical changes or overtraining in the gym. He believed Woods was overdoing the weight room, a critique stemming from Miller's belief that flexibility and touch were paramount. The greatest sign of Miller's respect was Woods' exemption from the choke label. Miller applied choke to almost everyone. Mickelson, Norman, Sutton, rarely to Woods. He recognized Woods, like Nicklaus, had a mental firewall others lacked. Miller noted Woods could win without his best stuff, a trait he only ascribed to Nicklaus. Miller respected Woods' ability to grind out pars, but Tiger was hard. Tiger was old school. Tiger dug it out of the dirt. Miller respected Woods not as a but as a throwback to the Hogan-Nelson era. Before we wrap up, drop a comment below. Of these 6 legends, who do you think best embodied Johnny Miller's ideal of greatness? Was it Hogan's technical perfection, Nicklaus's mental dominance, or Tiger's sheer aura? Let me know what you think. What do these 6 golfers reveal about Johnny Miller himself? They show a man who loved golf too much to lie about it. He knew what perfect golf looked like because he'd produced it himself. That rainy Sunday at Oakmont, feeling of the club face squaring perfectly, sound of the mash, feeling of invincibility. He refused to applaud mediocrity. Served his true respect for men who could visit that same Hogan, Nelson, and Snead were the architects who showed him the way. Nicklaus and Trevino were the warriors who met him on the battlefield and proved their worth. They beat him when he was at his best. They showed him what mental toughness really meant. Tiger Woods was the final confirmation that perfection was still possible in a different era. The old standards still apply, even as the game evolved. These 6 men formed the pantheon of the Desert Fox. They were the only ones who truly dug it out of the dirt and owned their destiny. In respecting them, Miller was paying homage to the difficulty and the cruelty of the game he spent a lifetime analyzing. His voice was sharp, his standards were impossible, but his respect, that meant everything.